Tonight's Tuesday night Bible study for the Anderson Small Group, I'm calling The Other Woman, and it comes from the book of Proverbs. We're working through the little booklet, How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth by Fee and Stewart. We're in the chapter on wisdom literature, and last week we introduced wisdom just a little bit to you and talked about its qualities and generalities, and we looked at a passage out of Ecclesiastes. And tonight, we're going to look at a more traditional passage from wisdom literature, the book of Proverbs, or a traditional book of wisdom literature, the book of Proverbs, and look at this contrast between wisdom, who is personified as a woman, and folly, who is personified as a woman in the book of Proverbs. And so we call this the other woman, wisdom and folly, and the two women of Proverbs. So let's take a look at this as we look at woman wisdom and woman folly. Just a few introductory remarks. J.I. Packer says that wisdom is the power to see and the inclination to choose the best and highest goal, together with the surest means of attaining it. Now, I highlighted those two phrases, the power to see and the inclination to choose. I think of selective hearing and how often little kids, if you're trying to get them to do something, raising your voice often doesn't help because they have tuned you out. They've turned you off. They have the power to hear, but they don't. They don't have the inclination to hear. And so wisdom here is provided by somebody that has the power to see and the inclination to choose what is best. I think you'd all admit that there are times in our lives where we see the wise path, but we choose a much different path. And that's what woman wisdom and woman folly are all about. We'll come back to Packer's definition a little bit later on. So wisdom literature is about making the right decisions in real life. It's very practical. And as we mentioned last time, there's two different kinds of wisdom literature. There's practical wisdom and speculative wisdom. Practical wisdom in Proverbs, speculative wisdom in Job and Ecclesiastes. Proverbs is largely about how do you make the right decisions in real time, real life, very down to earth. And in the Bible, wisdom is contrasted with foolishness. And a fool is not somebody that intellectually is not smart. A fool is someone who has the capability of making right choices, but does not do so. That's what it means to be a fool, is to have the ability or capability to make the right choice, but not do so. In Luke's gospel, a fool is somebody who makes every decision in life with no thought of eternity. Remember Luke's story of the man that had all this stuff and he couldn't keep it all, so he just built bigger and bigger barns all the time, and he didn't even realize that his life would come to an end very quickly. And all those bigger barns were to no avail because his life came to an end. So wisdom is making right choices. Do you know wise people? You know wise people that maybe never finished high school, don't have a college degree. You may not consider them intellectually super smart, but they know how to make right decisions. Or vice versa, somebody that's intellectually, they're very bright, brilliant, but can't make a common sense decision. That's what wisdom is all about. Wisdom literature is all about observation. It's all about looking around you and looking at what happens to other people and seeing what happens to them and then making right choices as a result. And I think of younger siblings growing up with an older sibling that made a bunch of mistakes maybe, and the younger sibling was smart enough to look around and learn and not make those same mistakes himself or herself. The power of observation. That's what wisdom literature is all about, where the writer is looking at the world around them and looking at people and how people respond to various situations. So here in Proverbs, the writer is going to observe two women. One is wisdom, the other is a fool. And both are personifications of wisdom. So woman wisdom is kind of unusual in the biblical world because it really was a man's world. I think unless perhaps maybe the book of Hebrews, nobody really knows who wrote that, but the Bible almost entirely written by men and frankly often about men, definitely a man's world, and to have wisdom portrayed as a woman is unusual. Men were often the only witnesses in a court of law. You could have 100 women and could never begin a synagogue in the Second Temple period of Judaism, but 10 men could constitute a synagogue. The marker of the covenant was male circumcision, so females were just kind of out of the loop. They were not part of this man's world. A husband could even annul a spiritual vow that his wife had made. And so men, they kind of ruled the roost, so to speak. And to have wisdom portrayed as a woman is really unusual. Why is that? Because that woman is attractive and beautiful, seductive and desirous. Those two little Hindaitis, those little pairings here, attractive and beautiful, seductive and desirous. That's what woman wisdom is all about. So let's look. We're going to look at 3 or 4 passages here as we do this study. Proverbs 8 says, "Does not wisdom call out? Does not understanding raise her voice? At the highest point along the way where the paths meet, she takes her stand. And beside the gate leading to the city at the entrance, she cries aloud, 'To you, O people, I call out. I raise my voice to all mankind. You who are simple, gain prudence. You who are foolish, set your hearts on it. Listen, for I have trustworthy things to say. I open my lips to speak what is right. My mouth speaks what is true. For my lips detest wickedness. All the words of my mouth are just. None of them is crooked or perverse. To the discerning, all of them are right. They are upright to those who found knowledge. Choose my instruction instead of silver, knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is more precious than rubies, and nothing you desire can compare with her.'" See this beautiful, attractive, seductive woman who's portrayed as a wise person. So her mouth speaks what is true. Choose her instruction like it's silver and her knowledge like it's gold. So first question, where do you find woman wisdom? Well, where do you find her? At the highest point along the way where the paths meet, she takes her stand. Beside the gate leading to the city, at the entrance, that's where woman wisdom is found. So along the way where the paths meet, that's often where decisions are made, right? That's the difficulty of you're going down a path, you have 2 or 3 or 4 choices. If you don't have a choice, life is easy. But when decisions come along, that's where life becomes different for us and a challenge. Deuteronomy 30:15 says, "See, I set before you today life and death and destruction." So which do you want? Which direction are you going to go? So wisdom places herself where there are decisions to be made at intersections. So think about some of your intersections of life. A marriage is an intersection. And before that, just who you enter into a relationship with, that is an intersection. And that single intersection can bless or ruin your life. Friends that you hang around with, that's an intersection. Financial decisions you make, career paths, all those are important decisions that you have to make along the way where paths meet, where you have more than one option. The hardest thing about the road not taken is that you never know where it might have led. And does that ever bug you? You're hiking a path and you see another path and you go, oh man, I really wonder where that goes. And you got to choose. You say, oh man, I wished I would have taken the other path. Oh man, I'm sure glad I took this way. This way is really, really pretty. But I wonder what that other way is like, right? That's kind of the way life is when it comes to these decisions that we make. So that's the first question. Where do you find her? And she's at those important intersections, junctures in life. A new move to a new location, a new city, that's a brand new place to begin again. And a lot of people start going to church and stop going to church because of something as simple as a move. Isn't that interesting? Person can move to another city and have been very active in a church and just quit, or vice versa. You find her at the gates leading to the city. This is an old ancient Near Eastern gate from the city of Tel Dan, a Bronze Age city gate here. And that's where things took place in the ancient world. You know, you didn't have internet, you didn't have other ways of communication, so decisions were made at the city gate. People hung out at the city gate. Judgments were rendered. The leader of the city would often come and sit in a chair and render decisions of what is right and what is wrong. A city gate is a point of controlled access where you display public information. Sorry. Sorry about that. Siri was listening to me and was wondering what I was talking about. Anyway, these are where decisions affect the entire city, these points of access that take place that are really important. Values. It's not hard to make decisions when you know what your values are. So it's your values that determine the decisions that you make. And so when this analogy is given here of the gates being the place where you find wisdom, that's where decisions are made, judgments are rendered, values come into play, controlled access of information. That all takes place there at these city gates. So our lives are the same way. We have points of contact where we make our decisions, where information is either embraced or rejected, where contact with other values, we either open ourselves to those other values or we close ourselves to those other values. Wisdom is all about making decisions. And if you don't make proper decisions, you're in trouble. You find her at the doorways. Those are opportunities. We often talk about open and closed doors, and we speak metaphorically of doorways. So that's another. You see, these are all places where you have a choice. You can go in, you can stay out. You can lurk at the edge of the doorway and peek in, or you can go right on in. You can ignore the doorway and walk right on by. Those are opportunities for us. And then you find woman wisdom at these open public streets and squares, the place where you're around all kinds of people with all different kinds of background and different demands that they place on your life. So you find these places to be significant, and wisdom takes her stand at these very public, prominent places of choice, intersections, doorways, gates, places where your decisions are made, and those decisions are life and death. Think about how one single decision, maybe in your life, impacted the entire direction of your life. I think so often about teenagers and how it just appears so random, and that's why we have to pray so much for our teenagers. But just one random decision they make seemingly can change the entire course of their life, for good or for bad. Social networks are part of this public square. Wisdom finds herself at the head of these noisy streets where you have this cacophonous, loud set of multiple demands all going on at the same time, and where we're forced to make some kind of choice. So will you choose wisely? Will you make up your mind that with God's help, you will make the decisions that lead to life, not the decisions that lead to death? So the first question, where do you find her? The second question is, how does woman wisdom speak? Well, she speaks loudly. Chapter 8, verse 1 and chapter 1, verse 20 to 22 says she lifts up her voice in the public square. She cries out, asking for people to come to her. She is summoning and beckoning and calling people to come her way. And it's true in our society too, and in ancient societies, men can get away with being loud and defiant, and they're kind of called manly, and they're their own person, and they do their own thing. But if a woman is loud in making requests, she's often seen as being too manly or being too loud or not being very ladylike. But woman wisdom is this woman standing at intersections or in public places, and she's loudly crying out and saying, hey, come to me. Those of you who want to find wisdom, I'm your source. Come to me. And she is attractive, and she's winsome, and she's seductive in a positive sense, where she is calling people to come to her. This personification of this loud, beautiful woman crying out for people to come. Out in the open, wisdom calls out. She raises her voice in the public square. On the top of the wall, there's one location we didn't talk about. Can you picture this? The city wall. She's standing on the top of the wall, crying out. At the city gate, she makes her speech. How long will you who are simple love your simple ways? How long will mockers delight in mockery, and fools hate knowledge? How long? Ask yourself that question. Really, how long am I going to continue in this direction that I'm going? How long am I going to do this? Am I not going to listen to God's wisdom? And she says, hey, you dum-dum, how long are you going to continue on this path? You can't see where it's leading you? Come to me. I'll show you where it will lead you. I'll tell you. But you've got to turn and come to me. So she doesn't just speak loudly, but she speaks to everybody. you know, our first reaction is, don't tell me what to do. She's speaking to everyone, and she speaks straight. I like people that just tell me, because I'm not very good at guessing what they want. Man, straight up, she tells people what is what. And sometimes people don't like this either. They want people to be a little bit less direct and a little less blunt. But this woman, wisdom, speaks loudly. She speaks broadly to everyone. And she talks straight. She doesn't mince words. And she says, if you ignore me, you're going to pay the consequences. We'll look at this passage again here in just a minute. But you can't ignore what I'm saying without it costing you. And then third question is, where will this woman take you? This woman wisdom. You see the picture there? She calls people out. They come to her. And then she takes them somewhere. Or where does wisdom take you? Blessed are those who listen to me, watching daily at my doors, waiting at my doorway. For those who find me find life and receive favor from the Lord. Those who fail to find me harm themselves. All who hate me love death. Now you may think that's over-exaggeration, but it's not. Our decisions lead to death or life. Life in its abundance, life in all the wondrous things that comes, or death and the depravity of what death is all about. So we have to listen, watch, wait. That's what wise people do. They listen for wisdom. They watch for wisdom. They wait for wisdom. They make good decisions. And they have the power to see, going back to Packer's definition from the first slide, and the inclination to choose. Will God open your eyes to see? And if he does, will you choose the right path? So now quickly, let's look and change gears. There's another woman. Now, anytime there's another woman, that's not good, right? That's always disaster. You hear about men talk about the other woman, or you hear secondhand about a man who has another woman. That's always a disaster. And that's true in the Bible. There is woman wisdom, but there's also woman folly. Now, she's called a number of names in Proverbs: the adulteress, the strange woman, the immoral woman, the wayward wife, the prostitute, the unruly woman. All those are terms for this foolish woman that leads people down the opposite path. She is also attractive and beautiful, seductive and desirous. So she also is attractive and beautiful, seductive and desirous. I don't know what it is about foolishness and making dumb decisions, foolish decisions, but there's something attractive about foolishness. Maybe it's a chance of making a bunch of money without much effort. Maybe it's something that we tie into and we think is going to be good for us. But at the end, this is a mistake. So this is the other woman that's talked about. Folly is an unruly woman. She's simple and knows nothing. She sits at the door of her house on the seat of the highest point of the city. Haven't we heard that before? So she's at the same places, calling out to those who pass by. Let's go straight on their way. Let all who are simple come to my house. To those who have no sense, she says, stolen water is sweet. Food eaten in secret is delicious. But little do they know that the dead are there, and her guests are deep in the realm of the dead. So see, she's at the same place. So imagine yourself in a busy outdoor marketplace, and all these people are calling out to you, wanting your attention, and wanting you to come into their stall where they're vending their wares. That's kind of the way it is here, is both woman wisdom and woman folly are at the doorways, at the highest points of the city, at the public places, calling on everybody to come their way. So they're at the same places, the street, the squares, at every corner. The Bible is fond of saying is her feet do not stay at home. She's out running around looking for somebody to meet up with. That's woman folly. Proverbs 7 has this very alarming story of the way that adultery works. At the window of my house, I looked through the lattice. I saw among the simple, I noticed among the young men, a youth who had no sense. He was going down the street near her corner, walking along the direction of her house at twilight as the day was fading, as the dark of the night set in. Then out came a woman to meet him, dressed like a prostitute and with crafty intent. She's unruly and defiant. Her feet never stay at home. Now in the street, now in the squares, at every corner, she lurks. She took hold of him and kissed him, and with a brazen face she said, "Today I have fulfilled my vows. I have food for my fellowship offerings at home. So I came out to meet you. I've looked for you and have found you. I've covered my bed with colored linens from Egypt. I perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Come, let's drink deeply of love till morning. Let's enjoy ourselves with love. My husband is not home. He's gone on a long journey. He took his purse filled with money, and he will not be back till full moon." With seductive words, she led him astray. She seduced him with her smooth talk. All at once he followed her, like an ox going to the slaughter, like a deer stepping into a noose, till an arrow pierces his liver, like a bird darting into a snare, little knowing it will cost him his life. Now then, my sons, listen to me. Pay attention to what I say. Do not let your heart turn from her ways or stray into her paths. Many are the victims she has brought down. Her slain are a mighty throng. Her house is a highway to the grave, leading down to the chambers of death. So, how does this woman speak? The same way. Loudly, but loud and defiant, loud and undisciplined. Folly is an unruly woman. She is simple and knows nothing. So, woman wisdom speaks loudly, but she talks straight to you. She doesn't mince words. Woman folly is defiant, abrupt, abrasive, and equally as loud. Same way that woman wisdom speaks. She lurks, she hides, and she waits. So these two women are at the heart of these opening 9 chapters of the book of Proverbs. And they represent those decisions that are an important part of our life. The stakes are high. One road leads the right way. The other road does not. One decision leads to life and fullness. The other decision leads to death. And these decisions come at important intersections where we have opportunities, due to the situations we come across, to choose life or choose death, to choose wisdom or choose foolishness. Billy Graham says, if you don't make a decision, then time will make it for you, and time will always side against you. Isn't that rough? You can't just ignore it. You've got to make the decision to choose God's way, choose God's life. Beth Moore says, when the stakes are high, bow down low. I like that. is submit yourselves. If you don't know what to do and the stakes are high, whether it's a relationship that you're in, a decision you have to make, bow down low. Let God lead you. And then you have to have the fortitude to choose and to make the decision that he leads you to. The Old Testament has a very realistic way of looking at things. God hasn't stacked all the cards and made all the decisions for us. We have real decisions to make. And the results of those decisions are lasting and impactful. And my prayer is that we'll all make the right one.